28. He'd been sawing into the Arbaleth's corpse for nearly 4 minutes when the cooldown on his ring ended. He paused and formed another bubble, this one closer to the other blue glow Gryph hoped were the eggs. The current bubble had about a minute left before it would collapse, sending thousands of pounds of Arbaleth corpse thundering to the lake bed, with him underneath. One last rip and tear, and he had the creature's toxin gland. He'd been incredibly careful not to cut into it. He had no idea if the toxin needed to be injected to be effective, but he was sure not planning to find out. The thing was the size of a large watermelon. Gryph wondered just how much poison he'd be able to extract from this treasure, and just what he'd be able to do with it. He cut away at the strands of flesh holding the sack in place, careful to tie off one that looked to be the poison delivery tube. With a rubbery snap that reminded Gryph of calamari, the sack came free. He looked up to see the air shield was now flickering at an alarming rate, and Gryph swam to the right into the second air shield. And a few seconds later, the first one blinked out. The blubbery flesh of the Arbaleth sagged down once again, flopping onto the spot he had just been standing. He checked the time and his current mana levels. So far, so good. You have found an Arbaleth toxin gland. This incredibly rare item can create a poison that could make enemies susceptible to thought magic and other unidentified effects. You also get the sense it could craft an item that could grant immunity to poisons and other unidentified effects. He stashed the gland in his inventory, thankful not just for the satchel's auto-organize feature, but also for its preservation feature. The last thing he wanted was a bag full of rotten, toxic flesh getting all over his stuff. Gryph swam down towards the glow of the eggs and cast Halo of Air again. A moment later, the cooldown on the ring ended, and he created another air shield bubble. This one was further down and under the beast's body. By his count, he had less than 3 minutes before the second bubble timed out and collapsed. If he wasn't finished by then, he'd be trapped and spend the last few moments of his life waiting to die by blubber smothering. He hacked into the abomination's flesh once more, and the dagger cut through a membrane with a snap. Inside, he found 3 leathery sacks that resembled deflated footballs, but for giants. Umbilicals led up to the Arbaleth's body. As he moved to cut the closest umbilical, something inside the leathery sack moved. Gryph jumped back in shock, his heart pounding madly. Maybe this isn't the best idea I've ever had. He watched for a tense few seconds as the thing inside the egg stopped moving. Then, with a deep breath, he cut the umbilical. He grabbed the egg and shoved it into his satchel, hoping that the stasis effects of the intradimensional folds would prevent the egg from doing something horrible, like hatching. Congratulations, you have completed the quest Harvest the Arbaleth. You have harvested items from the Arbaleth corpse. Reward, extremely rare crafting and alchemy ingredients, XP 5,000. Gryph took a deep, calming breath and smiled. Mission accomplished. A quick glance told him he had another minute and a half before the second bubble collapsed. He had the time and got to work on the second egg. As he sawed through the umbilical, his mind wondered what good would come of harvesting these eggs. He sure as hell would not raise a pet Arbaleth. The one had been enough of an abomination. 2 could bring apocalypse. The second egg came free, and he tucked it in the satchel. He examined it with Harvest. You have found an arbaleth egg. This insanely rare item of both incalculable worth and incalculable danger. You feel as if it could create a potion that will give a permanent resistance increase to thought and ethereal magics and other unidentified effects. You also get the sense it could craft an item that will protect a large area from thought and ethereal magics and other unidentified effects. It can also give birth to an arbaleth, a species that has long been a scourge on the realms. Use wisely. My word, Gryph muttered in shock. This thing was amazing and insanely dangerous. He placed the second egg into his satchel, sending a silent prayer that the stasis effect contained these seeds of destruction. The second air shield blinked, a sure sign that time was up. Gryph knew he'd have to leave the third behind, but there was no way in the 9 hells he would leave it alive. He flexed his hand on the ice dagger and pumped a full charge into it. With a powerful thrust, Gryph plunged the blade into the egg sac. The thing inside the egg screamed in his mind, and he winced in pain. He thrust again, and the noise stopped. The blinking of the air shield had grown critical, and Gryph kicked off from inside of the wall of solid air and emerged from under the massive body. A moment later, the second shield failed, and the bulbous corpse collapsed. Gryph smiled to himself, cast Halo of Air again, and began a slow, steady swim upwards. He was halfway to the surface when the fleshy body of the arbaleth shook and rumbled. A second later, something lithe and fast shot out from an orifice near the arbaleth's rear fin. It turned and darted towards Gryph.